Today, we're talking to John Munsell, CEO at Bizzuka, about AI programs he's developed for LSU and technology leaders. You're listening to Joel Beasley, Modern CTO.
So I was actually very curious to talk with you about what you're doing with Louisiana State University. Your AI systems are like mandatory knowledge there. Can you explain that to me?
So what happened is a year ago, the provost of LSU came over. He had heard I was doing some cool stuff in AI, and so he came over and we started to talk about it. And then he was telling me all the things that LSU was doing. Then he asked me, well, what are you doing? And I showed him this framework we had created to help people really understand how to generate prompts and how to get the most out of AI without constantly having to go back and forth. And he was like, whoa, I've never seen that before. Do you have the prompts to match this framework? And I was like, yeah. And I showed him this structured approach that we use. And he was like, wow, I've never seen anything like that. Would you be interested in teaching the honors students next semester? And I was like, I don't know that I want to do that, but I think we could have a bigger impact on the workforce if we taught businesses and their employees. And so he said, I love that. So he connected me with LSU's continuing ed, and we put together a program, and now we go through LSU to help upskill people and teach them about what we call scalable prompt engineering. It's a different kind of technique for prompting AI.
Well, how does that work?
So think of it this way. I always kind of liken it to a spreadsheet. You've built spreadsheets before, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so in a spreadsheet, you don't hard code a variable into a row and then copy it across the columns. Like if you wanted sales to increase by 10% all the way across, 24 months, you wouldn't say, hey, take this sales number and then do a times 0.10 and copy the 0.10 all the way across, right? You'd put 10% in a cell up here, and you'd have that formula refer to that cell, and then you would copy that across so that you could change the 10% in one spot to 12%, and all the formula would change. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So it's the same kind of process with AI. So instead of creating these giant paragraphs of prompts where potentially you could get what we would call prompt conflict, we teach people how to bracket them up or containerize bits of information in what we would call a stack and a variable. And so then somebody else can look at this prompt and go, oh, if I take this stack out and I plug this stack in, I can get a completely different result out of it. So if a container, for instance, is their persona, let's say, and your target persona, here's a kind of a classic example. If in marketing you're tasked with recruiting, let's just say a new operations director, okay? And if you're going to post that job on, say, Indeed.com, that job has to sound really sexy, right? It's got to appeal to that person, that persona. Well, HR has to write a job description too, but that job description has to appeal to the regulatory authorities, to the internal teams, et cetera. So it's got to be more clinical. All you're doing is you're telling AI to write a job description, but in one role, you're just saying, I want to target this position or this persona, and then you might give it another variable that tells it how appealing it should be. And then HR just swaps that persona out and makes it for a handbook and changes one other description. And the prompt or the request for the AI is the exact same thing. Mm-hmm. Makes sense? But it creates a completely different output. And there's lots more examples than that. But once people see that mechanism, then it allows them to create shareable knowledge. But if they just start writing paragraphs of prompts, that's hard to scale and hard to share. Does that make sense?
What software are you using for scaling and sharing prompts?
So internally, we use Notion, and we're in the process of building a database that people could share internally. So the idea is that it's not just this, massive group of Word documents, but it's a structured process for approaching prompting where people could actually look at the variables, they can look for the stacks, they can get access by searching a specific use case. They get rewarded when somebody sees their prompt and shares it and uses it or repurposes it. So it's kind of like gamifying prompting, but it's a very structured way to approach prompting, which just makes it so where I could go look at anybody's prompt and immediately get acclimated to it and know what they're trying to accomplish, and I could probably see where it's going off the rails too.
Have you looked at projects like Agenta, like the prompt engineering ones where you craft a prompt and then you run it against the model? You can compare an analysis versus multiple models. You can essentially, like GitHub, you can like make iterations and commits and changes to the prompts. Have you seen these groups of tools out?
I haven't really messed with that one, but what I do, it depends on what the model is. There are, like for instance, Claude responds differently to this specific style. They all pretty much know the same thing. They all respond the same way. It's just that the variables that we use might adjust. So for instance, when it comes to copywriting, Claude does a really good job with copywriting. So I don't have to put as many guidelines in a style voice or something like that. ChatGPT, I have to put a little bit more into it because ChatGPT's, it just writes differently. If I were to go into Gemini, same thing. There would be parts of the prompt that it would potentially ignore. And so I've gone into all of them and taught it how to write this way, taught it how to write prompts this way, and they all do a pretty good job. But I always have about a 20% correction that I have to make to it because it'll help you refine your idea, but the execution is always short. I don't know whether that's your experience or not, but that's kind of been mine.
Yeah, I use it heavily. I built my own custom tools on top of it to help me use it better for our own internal projects. I would say that your assessment of Claude is right. We use Claude as when we need to write content. It just has a better first iteration. But nonetheless, we still have to tweak it and teach it for each individual use case. We actually built like our own prompt management software because what was happening is we have multiple producers across multiple shows here for the podcast. And so we wanted to standardize, okay, this producer had his own prompt for how he turns transcripts into show notes. This producer had his own prompt. And so there wasn't any social fabric that connected these prompts and allowed them to say, okay, at this business, this is the prompt we use to turn transcripts into show notes. And then, to be able to see that template and modify it over time. So yeah, we've had to figure that out quite a bit.
Yeah, but see, what you've obviously figured out for yourself is how do you scale that, right? Because if everybody's doing it differently, you're all going to get different results. But if I haven't obviously looked at any of your prompts, but when we're dealing with an organization, that's the first problem that we encounter is that it's fragmented. Nobody's got a standard. Nobody has any kind of framework for understanding what needs to go into it. Especially when they start building like Claude projects or custom GPTs, forget agentic workflows. Just start at the basic level, right? Everybody's doing it differently, and some people have gotten to the point where they've got a routine, and the rest are still trying to figure it out. And then once they say, okay, well, now let's try to get more of the staff using it because Jane over here is kicking butt, but Johnny over here, not so much. That's when they realize, okay, we have to have some standards. We have to have a framework. We have to have a common level of understanding and a process. And that's where this approach seems to help out because it's just a very easy way for people to understand what's in the prompt and then what parts need to be standardized so the output's the same. But like you were saying, you're grabbing the transcript and turning it into show notes. That's a really specific process, and it's an easy one to standardize. But the other thing is, I don't know. You're writing, as you, I'm sure, are well aware. The writing that these GPTs will do is influenced by so many things in your prompt. If you don't know what's affecting it, it's really easy, or it's really difficult to get it to write the way you want it to, and you keep writing sentences differently and doing things differently to get it somewhere. And it's typically because you haven't recognized that there's some other piece of your prompt that's conflicting with the one piece that you think is going to affect the writing style.
It's a lot like Googling. You can hire 50 different people, and the ability for them to Google for a result is wildly different across the individuals.
Yeah.
And some people, like I've been a software engineer for 17 years. I happen to be really good at Googling. Right? Yeah. Like I'm really good at searching, and then I'll interact with like other people in my life who, don't have that experience. And I'm like, let's get it going. Let's move faster. Let's get a nice, quick, good search term in there to get what we want out of it quickly. But yeah, prompting, I think, is going to be a huge skill. I mean, I don't think it's going to be. It is a huge skill. Like it's a massive skill you have to have, and whoever's adopting it and figuring it out. So when I saw that you had made a framework and that you're teaching organizations like how to, do well with prompting. I'm a curious person. I'm a learner. I'm not like I've got it figured. I don't think I have it figured out. I think I've done a pretty good job of getting it to achieve the result. But I want to find out who smarter people. What are they doing? What's going on there?
Well, so here's the thing. You've figured it out. You're in that level of unconscious competence, right? Where you know it so well, you aren't even sure why you know it well, but when you look at somebody else that they're doing it wrong, and then you just kind of start doing it. If you were to document what you know into a process, then it becomes scalable knowledge, right? Mm-hmm. But you're so good at it because you've been doing it so long. And this is what we find with a lot of software engineers, because I've had a software development company for the past 25 years, and I actually 26 years, and sold off the agency side, is what we would call it, about 2.5 years ago to do this. But software engineers get so good at what they're doing, and they get so pissed at anybody that doesn't know it like they do.
My wife would confirm that, yes.
Yeah, right. Yeah. My wife would too. It's so hard leaning over her shoulder and go, no, this button, where you're almost dragging her hand to where it goes there. Yeah. Oh gosh, I hope this one doesn't make it on film.
It's going to. It's a good one.
But what I figured out was that if I could dissect how I was doing it so that I could explain it to somebody else, then I would be on to something. Because in my head, I could see it, right? I could just see it in my head, but I'd never really forced myself to put it on paper. And so I started teaching people. And because I had this concept of like, look, if everybody structured their prompts this way, it would be really easy to figure out where they went off the rails, and it would be really easy to correct it. And so I taught a 6-week course, and the first 2 weeks, I could see that they weren't getting it. And I was like, man, one of my superpowers has always been to take a really complex concept and simplify it in graphics, because I'm a visual person, And I used to be in the financial services industry for about 17 years, and to explain investing concepts for a business, and it was really challenging for a lot of people, but I found a way to graphically depict how it would work, and it was simple, right? And so I thought, okay, I got to figure out how to explain to these people what needs to go into a prompt so that they don't have conflict and they can see where they can do it. And are you familiar with the business model canvas at all?
Oh yeah. There was a whole series of books, but one of the business model canvas,
Yeah, his Business Model Generation was the first book. And I saw that guy speak in 2012 at an Inc. 5000 conference. And so I immediately bought the book, and I blew up the poster and would walk, our employees through it and say, look, this is how we operate as a business. So they could really kind of see all the moving parts. Because, as you're trying to scale a business, a lot of people don't see the moving parts. They see their part and they get pissed because, they think you don't see their part. And so when they see the whole thing, it makes a lot more sense. And so when I was struggling to explain it to him, I don't know, man, I all of a sudden the business model canvas just popped into my head, and I literally had a 6-foot version of it sitting in my office. And I'm like, okay. So I grabbed it, and this is a hoot, because I knew all the ingredients that needed to go into a prompt. And I thought, how do I do this really quickly and then finesse it? And I thought, why don't I go to ChatGPT and see if ChatGPT knows how to map these things out? And so I went through a couple of exercises with it to get it to map them out. And I was like, it's not quite what I'm seeing, but it's pretty close. But I was like, hey, if AI gets it, then these people will get it if I just get it in the right framework and right organization. And so I started to manipulate it, because the one thing that ChatGPT couldn't figure out is the sequence, So in the business model canvas, if you remember, there are 2 blocks at the bottom, and one's for revenue and one's for expenses. And then across the top, there are market segments and all these other things. It's divided into debits and credits, just like in accounting systems, And I thought, okay, well, when you're constructing prompts, there are certain things that you need to have in it. And if you don't have it in there, you're going to have to realize that your output's not any good, and you'll have to throw it into your next request or your next request or your next request until eventually it has what it needs. But if you knew what those things were up front, and you could structure them in blocks of information, then you could swap out those blocks, and it becomes a more scalable framework for prompting rather than paragraphs. And then once I put all that together and I showed it to him in the 3rd week, everybody clicked. Everybody was like, oh, wow, now I get it. And at that point, they understood what the prompt stack framework looked like. They understood why it was scalable. They understood what to put in it. And they understood, where potential conflicts would occur. And the next cohort, I was teaching it again. And everything went smoothly. And then we came up to an office hours, because we teach it, and every week we have office hours for people to bring their questions to it. And the end game is they have to do a capstone project, which is a custom GPT. Well, this gal was creating a chatbot for the ophthalmology industry. And she says, John, I got a problem. I'm like, okay, what's that? She goes, I can't get my chatbot to stop talking like a pirate. And I was like, what do you mean, a pirate? Yeah. Like a legit pirate? She goes, yeah. And I go, show me what you're talking about. Because I was like, I don't know. Yeah. And sure enough, she puts in her request, and he goes, oh, hey, matey, arr. It just starts doing all this junk. And you're like, what the heck? And I said, well, show me your prompt. And she had fallen back on the paragraph style prompt. And up here, she had told it, you're this, educational helper that teaches people how to learn or how to sell ophthalmology products inside the clinic. And then down here, for the voice, and again, all in the paragraph, she says, I want you to, use a little bit of humor, kind of like that funny uncle. And then she goes on to say some other stuff about how it's best to write. Well, in the one stage, she told it to be a helpful assistant. And then she told it to be a funny uncle. Right? Well, the funny uncle then tells the AI it's talking to a child. And apparently AI thinks pirates are funny to children. And so it starts talking like a pirate, a very helpful, funny, stupid pirate. So I had to say, okay, let's go back. First thing we want to do is create a block called role. Well, just define what that role is very specifically. We don't want to get all flavorful or anything. Just say you're a sales trainer. Okay, that's it. We don't have to get fancy. Then in the voice, let's calibrate the voice a little bit. So instead of saying, I want you to talk with a little bit of humor, every AI tool is going to gauge its own level of humor. So she changes models, she has to change it. But if you say humor equals 2 out of 10, every model understands what that is, right? So it's a highly calibrated way. And we have like 56 different style voice kinds of parameters that we could use. We only use like, I don't know, somewhere between 3 and 7 in a prompt. But when you see something off the rails, you can look at what those adjustments are and shove it into your prompt, calibrate it, and it works. But anyway, we did that, and instantly it started to talk like she wanted it to. But it was because she was doing a different method, and there was what we call prompt conflict, right?
So who are you teaching this to? Is this just like the average operations? Just average employee?
Yeah, so good question. Yeah, we're teaching it. Well, the majority of people that come to us are C-suiters that are trying to figure out how to scale it in their organization. And so they just want to understand it. And now we're starting to get, like we've taught, 10 LSU professors. We've taught 20 different CEOs, CFOs, and CXOs of some sort. We've taught marketing agencies. We've taught, a bunch of different, it's all over the board. But what I'm in the process of doing, I'm done. I just have to do one more thing. I've written a book on this. It's called Ingrain AI, and it teaches businesses how to scale an AI-first culture in their organization from strategy all the way through execution. So it's not one of these books that says AI is important and it's coming for you. It's one of these things that says AI is important, but here's exactly how you do it. So it's literally walking you through how to do it. So it's more like an instruction manual. So if you want to learn how to do scalable prompt engineering, there's an entire chapter on that. If you want to learn how to use the AI strategy canvas to run strategic discussions and define AI initiatives for your company, it'll teach you how to do that. So it does all of that, but not quite to an LSU's academic record or scrutiny to where, it wouldn't be sitting in your classroom. It's a business book for business people or for people who are just trying to use it on the front end, right?
When will that book be out?
Well, with any luck, it'll be out next week. That's the dream. I inside the book, I tell people where they can go if they want to download stuff, and I've got some resources like prompt database and other junk. I have to finish building that website. So it's really the automation behind it that's holding me up right now. I got my editor going through the final pass, which will be finished this afternoon, and then I'm going to push it out there. But what I've done for, other people, if your people hear about it and they want a copy of the book, if they go to Bizzuka, bizzuka.com/ingrain, and they tell me they heard about it on your podcast, I'll send them a digital copy of the book for free, because I just want it to get out there. I want people to.
They need to buy it on Amazon.
Well, hell, if they'll buy it on Amazon,
they need to give you some money. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah.
We'll put some Amazon links in there. We have a lot of CTOs, like chief technology officers, VPs of engineering, those types that listen to the show. And we do have some people that aren't in that category that listen in. But for the technology leaders that, maybe they're not programming every day. They haven't been programming for 5, maybe 10 years, but they've seen the AI come up. Maybe some of their staff's using it. What sort of tips can you give them that would make them look good? What areas should they be looking at? What should they need to know in order to catch up and get ahead of the curve here?
Good question. Well, every AI tool is good at something different, And the reason I brought up DeepSeek's R1 is because you can actually access it through Perplexity. And as long as you don't upload confidential stuff in it, you're okay. But the reasoning stuff behind it is insanely fast and deep. It's different than O3, but it's fascinating to watch it think through problems. So I would really recommend going to something like that to help you think through problems. The other thing is as a CTO, one of the things, if you're a CTO, you're in a company that's got more than 6 people in it, right? So you've got some employees, you've got some responsibilities. If you want to scale AI use, then you really need to be in a position to help your organization do that methodically. And that would be the key, right? And so it's not just about, hey, which one of these tools is going to help us write code faster? Because, O3 is amazing at writing code. O3 Mini and all those they do insane jobs with code writing. So that would speed a lot of stuff up. But to really get AI scaling in your organization, you need an AI champion, whether it's a chief AI officer or whatever. But that person needs to have a really large creative bone in their body, as well as a structure bone, right? You can't really get AI scaling inside of an organization if everybody's afraid to use it. And you can't get it to scale if the CIO puts too many handcuffs on people. So I think a good CTO is going to be one who's learned how to be creative and has learned how to teach people how to use AI to help them with their own creative processes and to execute their jobs better, right? And that's where I think coming up with a system, a framework that everybody can understand makes a lot of sense. And that's kind of what we try to teach is, look, first get everybody on the same page. Let's let everybody speak the same language when it comes to AI. And then that's where the magic really happens. But if everybody's self-taught or everybody's going to a different YouTube channel to learn how to do it, that's going to be herding cats if it really starts to scale in an organization. And that's kind of what we keep hearing out there. I don't know what you're hearing through your audience, but when I talk to a company that has, more than 100 employees, they're actually starting to get tense because they realize that they don't have a handle on how this is being used. And you've got some people that are outliers and some people that are just too afraid to use it. And they know that if they don't get everybody in sync, then they're going to get passed by. And so I think a strong CTO is going to say, hey, let's get everybody in sync. If we get everybody in sync, it's kind of like one of those, you've seen those big, what do you call them, scullers, those long boats where you got 10 people rowing and, they used to do in Tampa Bay all the time. But if you're not rowing in sync, you're either going off track or you're slow. But once everybody's in harmony, things just fly. So I think that would be my advice to a CTO is if nobody else is stepping up, you step up, but get it organized.
Well, John, I want to wrap up here on a couple questions about the book. Is the book for sale today on your website?
No, the only thing they can do today is request it. And then when it's available, then I'll either send them a digital copy or I'll tell them where they can get a hard copy. So, but it should be available. Well, the dream, Joel, was that it would have been available in November of last year, but now I'm focused on February the 15th. So
there you go.
It should be
Valentine's Day, maybe.
Day after Valentine's
maybe the day
Day.
after. Yeah.
Right. I don't want to get in too much trouble.
Right. What's your one tip for writing a better prompt?
Structure in a single word. The thing that you have to try to do is think about what your goal is for the output, and then think about what the AI needs in order to do that job effectively for you. Like you can't just go, I've seen all these little prompts that go, oh, I want you to write a marketing analysis for this industry, blah, 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 blah. Or I want you to write a blog post about topic X. The problem with that is that everybody can do that. And it's not going to be injected with your own thoughts, your own beliefs, your own company information, your own products or services. All that stuff, you have to provide it. If you learn how to provide that in a prompt in a what I call a hot swappable block, then your prompting goes to a whole new level because you can use those blocks over and over again, and you're not constantly reinventing the wheel when you're trying to write a prompt, and then somebody else can use it. So to me, it's structure. It's how you structure it.
And if people are interested in doing business with you, how can they reach out to get you to come train or talk about what you're doing here with the prompt?
Yeah. Thanks. They just go to Bizzuka, Bizzuka.com, Bizzuka.com. And like I said, if they want to get a copy of the book, they go to Bizzuka.com/ingrain, INGRAIN, and we'll send them a copy.
Cool. Josh will set that up. Thank you so much for doing this. We made a podcast. How do you feel?
Love it. I appreciate you having me on.
Thank you so much for listening. And if you found this episode useful, please share it with a friend or a colleague who you think would get value from it. And if you have topics that you'd like to hear discussed on the podcast, either add me on LinkedIn or send me an email, joel@moderncto.io. Every time I get an email or LinkedIn message, it absolutely makes my day and inspires me to keep going.